Well, welcome and good evening to you all. I'm Nigel Hopkins, your controller I've put here for tonight. They put me down as MC, but I thought I'd better say controller, because it's going to be an evening of a little bit of banter, I should imagine, and I hope we can do that in the right manner. But it's good to see a good attendance here tonight. We weren't sure, or the Kapiti Chamber of Commerce weren't sure. There's so many events on, and these candidates, of course, are out just about every day and night. So it's good to see them here. But the election has a different field about it, hasn't it? That's for sure. And from the last two or three, and perhaps we have to thank the politicians or the political parties for creating the scenario ahead of us. And the books, of course, have been opened today, and that might change the scenario too. You hear a lot of debate there tonight as to what might happen, and there's a bit of toing and froing, so that might be something to be concerned about. And the Governor-General, well, she's given us the green light for the election to go ahead today, so I don't know what would happen if she said no. We'd be all wasting our time here tonight. But she said yes, we'll go ahead. So that's good. Now, I will come back shortly, but first I would like to introduce you to the chair of the Kapiti Coast Chamber of Commerce, who have put this event together tonight. Here's our chair, Heather Hutchings. Heather.
Thank you, Nigel, and welcome everybody, especially coming out on a chilly night, but hey, it's not raining, so we can be thankful for that. So I'd like to welcome the candidates. So Chris Farfoy, MP for Mana, welcome. Ewan Morrell, Mana National Candidate, welcome Ewan. Nathan Guy, MP for Otaki, welcome. And Rob McCann, Otaki Labour Candidate, welcome. So I'm not going to speak long because you're not here to listen to me, but thank you very much for giving up your valuable time. You're very busy, and it must be a little bit like, I guess, speed dating at the moment for you. As you're racing around, perhaps I should say speed networking, that might be a bit better. As you're racing around the next couple of weeks. So once again, thank you for coming this evening. But I'd also like to thank the Chamber Board and the Event Management Committee. They're the people that you see with all the name tags. They're all voluntary, and without them, we would not be able to have this event. So on behalf of Julian and myself, team, thank you very much. So I'm now going to hand you back to Nigel to get this event underway, and also Helene, who's going to be dinging the bell somewhere, I believe. Thank you. Oh, here she is.
Thanks, Heather. I like the speed dating touch myself, but never mind. Now, I've just recently returned from 4 weeks sojourn in France on a riverboat cruising. Now, small numbers on these boats, and you get between 80 to 100 people, and you get to know them very closely, and they come from all walks of life. Now, interestingly enough, I was the only Kiwi on these 3 cruises I did over there, and I got known fairly quickly as the K1W1. And once you get known as that overseas, it seems to stick, and you feel pretty proud about that. The Americans are keen to know about the beautiful country you have out there, so you spend a fair bit of time talking to them. I felt like a tourism advisory board member. And to the Aussies, in which much banter continually is handed out, but in a friendly way. And some of the Americans have been to New Zealand and just love it, and the others intending to visit, but you are so far away. Well, I told most we're not that far away, just around about 11 hours. And I said, consider what I've just done. 1 hour from Wellington to Auckland, 11 and a half hours from Auckland to Hong Kong, 12 hours from Hong Kong to Paris, and then an hour and a half down to Bordeaux. And they suddenly thought, well, yes, New Zealand's not as far away as they thought. Anyhow, what I was getting at were some of the comments from a top person in the Australian Reserve Bank, and he's fairly high up. He said, we in Australia are very envious of New Zealand's governance. He said, how you have survived the financial stress of earthquakes and other disasters and still ranked in the top 5 in the OECD. He said, it's quite amazing. He said, we're very upset that the Aussie government is going to spend 126 million Aussie dollars on a gay marriage referendum. He said they could do that overnight just by ticking the box. He said, everybody wants it. And they said, go ahead, do it. But they want to spend $126 million. Brexit, well, a lot of confusion and a lack of full effects on what it might do to the economy in the Britain area if it happens, because some people are saying it might not happen, but I presume it will do in the long run. Now, the Americans were not talkative about their president, of course. One said to me that many American citizens are embarrassed, but others still think he's doing a good job, and I heard a comment tonight on TV that there is a fair bit of feeling sometimes for him and against him. So they say your democracy system works well, but why only just 3 years and not 4 years? And perhaps that could be asked tonight. And a financial advisor from the UK said, when you read that UK homelessness is to rise by 46% in the next decade, that's 46% in the next decade, and their domestic power prices are to rise 12.5% from next month, and our maternity hospitals are at times unable to cope, etc., etc. So here we in New Zealand have been hearing about building more homes, better health services, better education. It is something that is common in many parts of the world when you get out there and listen to other people. But I believe that New Zealand has the ability to counter problems such as these through good governance. So enough from me. The format tonight is to allow each of these candidates, thanks for coming up, gentlemen, have a 5-minute uninterrupted pitch at this stage, okay? The bell will ring with 30 seconds to go, and it's rung at the 5-minute mark, and I'll be the Speaker of the House. Order, order. Sit down, please. Simple as that. Okay. I will then open it up with a question or two from the Chamber of Commerce they wish to have answered. Now, that's going to be interspersed with questions from you, the audience. So we just ask that when you want to ask a question, put up your hand. The microphone will come around, and wait till you get the microphone before you put your question. Otherwise, we won't hear what you're talking about. If you could just do that, it would be fine. Now, interjections are welcome, but not personal attacks, and I will control the velocity of the interjections. So the speaking order tonight is Mana Labour MP Chris Farfoy, the Mana National candidate Ewan Murrell, Otaki Labour candidate Rob McCann, and Otaki National MP Nathan Guy. And gentlemen, as I've mentioned to you, you can use the lectern or handheld mic. Now, just a quick note here, at the end of the meeting, tea and coffee will be served out in the foyer there, and these gentlemen no doubt will be standing around, and if you wish to ask further questions, do so. So I invite MP Labour for Mana, Chris Farfoy, to speak first. Chris.
Thank you, Nigel. And can I begin by acknowledging the candidates who are here today, my fellow Labour candidate Rob McCann, Ewan Murrell from National, and the Honourable Nathan Guy, the MP for Otaki. And I know there are some candidates from other parties. I can see a NAC t-shirt at the back, and we've got a Green candidate too. So this is an interesting time for all of us, so good luck to you all and all the success, but not too much. Look, for those, this is a joint meeting between the Mana and Otaki electorate, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Farfoy. I've been the Labour Member of Parliament for Mana now for 7 years. I'm number 20 on our list. I'm Labour's Chief Whip, which makes me the disciplinarian for the next 30 days. And I'm also our tourism spokesperson, our racing spokesperson, and associate broadcasting spokesperson. This election is going to be one of those defining elections, I think. It's going to be what I see as some serious change, and I think some resetting around some serious issues that we have in New Zealand. Can I thank the Chamber of Commerce for tonight and for the questions that you posed for us ahead of tonight, because I think they cover the big issues that New Zealand as a whole is facing. They are health, and you've got the health issues, and we'll talk about those at some stage. They're education, they're housing, and they are how we grow. And I think as you look at the next 10 or 15 years for the Kapiti Coast, the projections are that this place is going to increase in population by somewhere between 10 and 50,000 people. That's your average income, hopefully. But there are some serious questions about how we cater for that growth. And to be perfectly blunt, this election campaign is about whether or not you want the services or whether or you want to have a tax cut. We think that there is some serious investment needed to be made in the areas of health, in the areas of education, in the areas of housing, and all of these issues crop up as I do my work in and around the Kapiti Coast and the Mana electorate. I know there is a petition going around at the moment for increased services in a hospital here in the Kapiti Coast. I agree that there needs to be more health services here on the Kapiti Coast. They need to be there now, and we also need to cater for the future. I'm going to confront that issue straight up and say I think we need to have a conversation with the community before we know exactly what that looks like. And I've said that to Kevin and the group, and I'm going to stick to my word and say that, because we know that there's $2.3 billion in the health area that should have been spent over the last 4 years. And Labor will restore that funding to make sure that we can ensure that people get the better health care that we need, not just here on the Kapiti Coast, but right around the country as well. In the area of education, the Chamber of Commerce and the Kapiti Coast District Council has put together the Work Ready scheme, which I think is good. It will allow the local youth to be able to get the driver's licence, to be able to budget, to be able to make sure that they've got the discipline to be able to turn up to work, which happens to be almost a carbon copy of the school toolkit that Jacinda Ardern announced as a policy for us a week ago. It'll make sure that our youngsters are ready to work. So if there are business owners here in the room today, I can sense the frustration sometimes you have when you have people, and you might hire people who don't have the skills or don't have the habits to get to be useful at work. We recognise that too, and instead of it being a piecemeal operation right around the country, and kudos to the Kapiti Coast District Council and the Chamber of Commerce, we need to make sure that that is rolled out around the country. That all youngsters get the ability to have their driver's licence before they leave school, that they know how to budget, that they know what is expected of them when they're meant to turn up to work. In the area of housing, with an increase of about 10,000 people, roughly, over the next 10 or 15 years, we need to make sure there is enough affordable housing for everyone. There will be development of houses to buy, I can tell you that now. That's happened in Porirua as well, but we can't let that happen and not have an increase in what I would call affordable housing as well. Whether that be affordable housing to rent or affordable housing to buy, we've got to make sure that all New Zealanders have a decent and good home to live in. And that's, I think, one of the challenges that Kapiti has at the moment with the expected growth. And at the moment, I think if there were city councillors in the room too, and acknowledging them if they are, there is an issue with rental accommodation. Good quality and affordable rental accommodation and emergency housing in Kapiti as well. I also want to talk about police, because in the Kapiti Mana area, when the national government came into force, there were roughly 146 frontline police officers in the Kapiti Mana Policing District. When I asked a question via Parliament about a month ago, is that 30 seconds, Celine? Yep. The numbers that came out were there were roughly 104 frontline police officers. So we've lost 40 frontline police officers in the Kapiti Mana area over the last 8 years. And I think what that has done has meant that a lot of the prevention work that the police would have preferred to have done isn't being done, and we're seeing that in crime rates increasing. So the fact that we're committed to 1,000 more police over the next 3 years is something that I'm very proud of.
A lot of those issues will be questioned, so you can get your questions ready. If you wish to question on anything they say tonight, of course, do so later on. But there may be other issues outside of what they're speaking about you can bring up during the evening. Now, we'll ask our second speaker tonight, Mana National candidate Ewan Morrell. Ewan.
First of all, my name's actually Ewan Morrell. I've grown up with people mispronouncing my name, so that's right. So I guess the disadvantage I have is not too many of you on the Kapiti Coast actually know who I am. So who is Ewan Morrell? I was born in Lower Hutt and brought up in a state house. I lived there for a number of years, and eventually about 45 odd years ago, I moved to Porirua. I currently own a small business in Porirua, employing about 20 people. I am a past Porirua City Councillor for 12 years. I was Deputy Mayor for 3 of those 12. The other 9, I was Chairman of the Council. I'm the present Chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, and have been on the board of the Chamber of Commerce in the Porirua area for 20 years. I was the Wellington District President for the Real Estate Institute for New Zealand for 10 years, and have been their spokesperson until recently for the past 20 years, and have just retired from the board of the Real Estate Institute which I was for 10 years. I'm the chairman currently of the Pātika Foundation. I am Justice of the Peace for 25 years, and I'm past director of the Samaritans in Lower Hutt, which is a 24-hour telephone service, and I ran that for 5 years. I've been associated with this part of the world for 65 years, because next birthday I am going to be 70. And why would a 70-year-old stand? Well, I'm absolutely committed to this region. I spend most of my weekends here, but all of our politicians in the Poirua or the Mana electorate have never lived here when they have been selected. And that really has bugged me for a number of years. They've all been imported from outside and all been selected by their parties for various reasons. And, you know, our Mana electorate is better than that, and we deserve to have one of our own in that part of the world. Challenges that you have here, I understand about the health situation. I'm part of a small group in Poirua who's looking at the local health situation there, and we are in communication with the DHB there. And it's interesting, this gentleman, previous speaker, talked about, I mean, the DHB has had $3.9 million, nearly $4 billion, given to them in the last 9 years that we've been in there. So I'm not quite sure where they get their information from. The improved health facilities, as I say, are an important issue. The roading network here, for me, is very important too. The previous speaker objected to the expressway. Well, I don't know any one of you would object to the expressway. I understand there's a few sound issues there, but they will be overcome. But that expressway is probably done, and I've spent 2 hours coming many times to this part of the world in the traffic. So that expressway, and it's really, really important, and this government gave you Transmission Gully, and what we need to do is make sure that we get the Petone to Grenada, and we get some connectivity to the airport and to the hospital in the Wellington Hospital. And it's very important that this, as I say, that has to happen, and under a new government that's probably very much in jeopardy. In terms of private business, well, I own a small business, and it's important that we have a strong economy because, as I say, it's really, as I say, 9 years ago, the Labor government predicted that we were going to have decades of deficits. Well, even with the 2 major earthquakes that we've had, the global financial crisis today, we have a surplus announced today of $3.7 billion. It's crucially important to keep encouraging our businesses to compete and succeed, and not weigh them down with taxes and other various regulations. The national government has achieved much investment in housing, and we have a huge investment in housing. And some of you may shake your head, but there is a huge investment in housing. And this is an issue. Some of the infrastructure issues that we are now dealing with, particularly state housing, schools and roads, they haven't just happened in the past 9 years. They've been deteriorating for years, and this government is now attacking them and dealing with them and fixing them, and we will continue to fix those. The family income package that is going to be out in April of next year is going to give it $26 per week to many of our average families, and 600,000 more doctors at $18 and 300,000 more social service benefit cards were there. So yes, there's more needs to be done. But don't jeopardise the progress in the future that we've got this far. We're going to continue to drive, and we are delivering for New Zealanders, and we are going to continue to deliver, and I seek your party vote, the National Party vote, on September the 23rd. Thank you.
Thanks, Ewan, and it's Morell. Got it. Thank you very much. Wonderful. All right, so those are the 2 candidates for the Mana electorate. And of course, it's awkward, isn't it, having Mana electorate over this side of the railway line here and some down Raumati Road. One day we might get it where Paikakariki through to Otaki is one electorate and so forth. But that's another argument, I suppose, but might be something that these candidates here might be thinking about at one stage. Okay, we'll move on to our next candidate, and we move into the Otaki electorate, and that's the Labor candidate, Rob McCone. Rob.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Rob McCann. Yes, you've pronounced it wrong, but I honestly don't mind as long as you are able to remember that that is your next Prime Minister. And her name is Jacinda, because when you're on a one-name, first-name basis with the country, you know you've made it. She has, and she will tell us all that we're going to be relentlessly positive, but hard following that last speech, but I'll do my best. Now, I got into politics because I want my kids to have the same opportunities that I had. But the reason I got into Labour is because I want everyone's kids to have those same opportunities. And one of the things us wannabe politicians and politicians do is we get out door knocking and phone canvassing and meeting people. And you head right throughout the electorate and you meet people that you would never normally come across. And I met a number of those who are in circumstances that do not meet that criteria. They are being left behind. And I want to introduce you to a little boy called Andrew. This is Andrew, and this photo was taken 5 days after he was born. I went back to visit his mum. Now, on the first visit, she let me into the flat, and it was to show me what her accommodation was like. There were holes in the wall where they had added some extra parts to the house and never jib-stopped it. They'd never done anything, so you could look straight out. Her fireplace was empty because she was struggling to pay all the bills, so it was cold. But that wasn't the worst of it by far. I went into her shower area and she showed me the roof. There was black mould up there, the kind that you can't clean, and because you can't clean it because the roof was ready to come down. There was a hole in that roof. The wires were exposed where the fan should have worked. This was serious stuff to bring a little child into that house. Now, she'd asked the person who looked after the property for the landlord, and they'd sent someone down and they'd said it was serious, but nothing was done. And do you know what the advice was that they gave that young mum? To wash your baby in the kitchen. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is not the New Zealand that we hear about in government speeches. That is the New Zealand that is living just below where we get to see, just below the covers. And we should not accept $10 billion of roads to pave over this poverty. This is the reason why I'm in politics, to make sure that we all get a fair go. And that's why the Labour government is talking about building 100,000 houses, because we do have a housing crisis. And yes, it's been developing over a while, but we have a housing crisis that only the government does not think there is a crisis. We simply have demand that is too high. And when that demand is too high, it means that renters are in a very vulnerable position. So people who rock the boat get thrown out of their accommodation. And I can tell you here, that happens as well. We had a boy in our house for 7 weeks because his parents lost their rental accommodation. It happens over and over again, and it is something that we in this room should say, this is not the New Zealand that we will accept. So Labour is promising to build those houses, but we need to make them warm and dry. So we've got a healthy homes bill that will make sure that the rental accommodation that we have, and not all of it is bad, but there is some, and let's do something about it. We will make sure that it is warm and dry. Why? Because people who live in cold, damp houses get sick. They have to have time off work. They can end up in hospital. Children die. And it's not good enough, ladies and gentlemen. We need to do more to make sure that our country is fair, because we have a much, much better future in front of us if we all care. There are many in this room who want us to focus on the economics, but nothing about our economy is more important than having healthy families that contribute to that economy. And that is my message to you. Labour will make sure that we prioritise all of those families and put the infrastructure in place. It won't just be tar seal and roads. And that is 5 minutes.
That's Rob McCann. Brings out some interesting facts and figures there. Something else to chew on. Get ready for your questions. You'll be asked to put those in when the microphone comes around to you, if you put your hand up, so we hope you will. Now we move on to Otaki National MP, Nathan Guy. If Nathan would like to step forward. I think he's well known. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks very much, Nigel. Heather, can I acknowledge you? Helene, thank you very much, and your team for putting this event on. Can I acknowledge the candidates? And importantly, everyone that's turned up this evening on this rather chilly, but not wet winter's evening here in Paraparaumu. Thank you very much for coming along. At least at the end of this, you would have heard a contest of ideas, and you will be hopefully better informed than when you walked in the door. So thanks very much for your time and engaging with us this evening. This is my 5th campaign, and I'm really excited about it. I've had 3 campaigns before I got into central government, and I'm well connected with the local community, and I work hard for the people of Kapiti and Horowhenua. I don't want to take all of my 5 minutes. I really want to get on with the questions and engage with you, but I would just want to talk about a couple of highlights in the last term under the national government. The first one is that we are continuing to deliver locally. Just in 5 years, we delivered the Kapiti Expressway. And you'll recall that we ensured it would happen because we reformed the RMA to get it through in a consenting period of 9 months that would have otherwise taken 3 to 5 years. That expressway was delivered ahead of time and on budget. 18 kilometres long, 1.4 million trees planted, a cycleway, bridleway and walkway that is extremely well populated. I am in admiration of the contractors that delivered it, and we are all benefiting from it. It's interesting when I get out door knocking now, people often say to me, Nathan, we gave you a hard time at the time because we were unsure if the expressway was going to be the right thing for our community. And then they follow on and say we were wrong. And I'm sure you'll hear this evening that Labor were wrong when they opposed it going into the last election and said they wanted to have a cup of tea and redesign it. We are delivering Transmission Gully. You'll be driving on that in 2020. You'll be driving on the next section from Peka to Otaki. I have lobbied on your behalf to ensure that we get a full interchange at Peka. It makes no sense that when you get on the next section of the expressway that you can't get off at Peka. People are already going past Te Moana Road, and in a blink they're realising they're at Peka and they've got to turn around and come back. That's right, they've got to go all the way to Otaki and come back. It's about a 50-kilometre round trip. And then, of course, we're going to deliver the cycleway and the shared pathway all the way through to Otaki. Broadband is rolling out in this community, in Paraparaumu and Waikanai, almost done. I'm excited about that. Also, we have got a growing economy as a result. We made the announcement that we are going to ensure the road of national significance carries on up to Sanson and also have a real focus on the Manawatu Gorge. So in summary, Nathan Guy delivers locally, and so has the national government for you. And I have been delighted and privileged to be a minister for 8.5 years in John Key's cabinet and in Bill English's cabinet. Both men are stellar leaders of New Zealand. And today, when we open the books, a bit like opening up your personal bank account, you can see what a good shape this country is in because the economic stewardship of the national government. Yes, we need to do more in terms of social services and focusing in on local health initiatives. Thanks very much. Let's roll on and have the engagement.
Now, I'll just turn these microphones on so these gentlemen don't have to come up to the lectern each time, and they can just pass them along to whoever we ask. So I'll just give you that. Right. On there. Thanks. And we'll start, we won't muck around, we're nicely ahead of time, so we'll get plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions as well. But the Kapiti Chamber of Commerce have put down one or two questions they'd like me to put to the candidates, and we'll possibly start with Nathan. Seeing you've been talking about Transmission Gully, Nathan, the Kapiti Chamber of Commerce want to know what the next phase will be with the development of the Transmission Gully, of course, coming on very soon. What will your party do to help Kapiti continue to punch above its weight and with economic growth, encourage investment and make the most of the opportunities our region has? Does that make sense? Yep. Good.
Well, thanks very much. I've pretty much outlined that, but we are seeing the benefits of the investment that the government has made in roading and transport improvements. They're productivity, they're safety, it's connecting our community, and as a result of the investment, we're seeing the jobs being created locally. So the expressway created over 1,000 jobs, and long term, it's created about 500 jobs in our local community. With the rollout of ultra-fast broadband, it helps people to access health services from home. It helps people access a whole lot of online learning. It gets the work-life balance. So ultimately, instead of people travelling into Wellington for work, particularly small businesses that the Kapiti district is made up of, there's an opportunity to work from home. So Kapiti now is a real figure on the lower North Island map. People want to come and live here. So we've got a growing population. It hasn't just happened as a result of the expressway, but what's happened is the growth has moved up into Horowhenua. Horowhenua now are really excited because the last probably 20 years there hasn't been significant growth in Horowhenua, and we're seeing it now march up the coast, which is absolutely fantastic. And I can give you numerous examples in Otaki as a result of the expressway where people have come and they haven't left. They're working now in Transmission Gully. I can give you numerous examples in Foxton. I was talking to a motelier over there last week. He said he's full because of the new bridge, 70 million that's being invested. So infrastructure is a huge part of economic growth. Now we have got one of the best places to live in New Zealand. We've got the coastline and Kapiti Island. We've got tourism that continues to grow. We've got the Tararua mountain range. We've got fantastic cycleways and walkways. We, within reason, have got a pretty good climate. Normally, this winter's been a bit tougher than most, than I remember.
Right, Nathan, we'll get to
So in
Chris.
summary, infrastructure is hugely important for economic growth, and I'm very proud that ultimately we've created more jobs in this community.
Actually, I'll get Rob to answer to that because we're talking about the Otaki electorate more here than we are the mana, just at the moment. Rob.
I think what you find is Chris pushed me out and said, I'm the whip. Yeah, you'll notice that Nathan Guy is very, very optimistic and excited, but every time he mentioned jobs, he talked about roading jobs. Those roading jobs, apart from the people who are filling in the potholes and fixing the expressway, they move on. And we actually need to create lasting jobs, not short-term jobs that are actually paid for by
500 jobs were created. 500 jobs, Rob, were created as a part of the
Thanks,
expressway.
Nathan. I believe you're sitting down and having a rest at the moment. We need to create real jobs. You talked about the hotelier in Foxton. What's going well for them? Well, apart from the fact that moteliers unfortunately are also housing people in our electorate costing $1 million a week, they're housing the people building the road. Now, short-term gains, but not long-term gains for our community. What are we going to do to actually attract people here? One of the things we need to do is build houses so our young families can move here and raise a family. If they can't afford to rent to buy, they're not going to be able to come here. And that, I think, is something that is completely missing from the economic management of the National Party. Yes, we need ultra-fast broadband. That's great. Otaki is still waiting. But we need to make sure that we encourage our education to be able to take advantage of that. Get rid of things like national standards that are narrowing the focus of our children. And yes, well done on making sure that you are trying to link people in schools to jobs. And as Chris mentioned, that's part and parcel of our policy too. But we can't just rely on building roads. That seems to be the only answer that National has got.
Thank you. Chris, of course, is the Mana electorate. We've got to think about that each time because it's quite confusing. Mana down there, Otaki up here. But Chris.
I'll try and make it as simple as I possibly can.
Good. Thanks, Chris.
Look, I'm as excited as the others on the stage about the growth. But what we have to be careful of and mindful of as that growth comes to the Kapiti Coast is making sure that we have the services there that are able to sustain that growth. And I think that's what we're picking up when we're out and about in our street corner meetings around in Kapiti, is that, if we speak to young parents, they're worried about crowded schools. If you're talking to elderly, they're worried about access to affordable healthcare or full stop healthcare. So growth is good. But I think the difference between the National Party and the Labour Party at this time is you've got a choice. Do you want the services or do you want the tax cut? And I think when we're looking at the issues that are top of mind for people in the Kapiti Coast and around the country, they'd prefer the services. And I think that is the choice and the stark choice people have got. Growth is good. No one is going to stop or bemoan that. But what I think we need to make sure and be careful of is that we've got the services that go along with the growth so that people can live here happily and not be fighting the government all the time about making sure they don't want to travel into Wellington just to be able to go to the hospital.
Thanks, Chris. Which leads... You've sort of gone around the questions, but when you think of Bay of Plenty and Taranaki, they've got a regional strategy. So if you were to be the government, would you support sort of lobbying for a Kapiti regional growth strategy here? Ewan?
Well, during my time as councillor, I was part of the Wellington Regional Strategy, and we met quite often. And now we've got this other organisation called WRA, Reader or something or other, Reader. And I don't believe both of them are delivering for this part of the world or our electorate full stop. They tend to be focused around the Wellington area. So very much we will be pushing for a greater, both councils pay into that. So we would, as I would be pushing for a greater emphasis to be in this part of the world. So very much so.
Right. Rob, you got anything to say on that?
Well, yes, we had Ian Collier from Air New Zealand here, and one of the take-up messages that he talked about was that we need to refine our story. And it is something I think we all need to understand, is that an expressway drives people past your destination unless you've got something that they know about to come here for. And we need to make sure, and this is someone from Air New Zealand, Nathan, who's saying this, someone who understands what drives people into different areas, that the general public, not the people, we know what we've got, don't we? We've got beautiful countryside, we've got a jewel across the lake, across the water there, we've got the mountains right next to us, we've got cycleways, thank you Nathan, but we need the rest of the country to understand that, so we need to redefine and work out how we're going to sell that message.
All right. Nathan, you better
just
respond to that.
on the specific question, which is regional economic development strategies. We're working with 10 regions at the moment, and I know this pretty well because I'm the Associate Minister of Economic Development. We've chosen these regions because primarily they're not doing as well as they should be doing in terms of economic growth. So Horowhenua, just up the road, is part of the Horizons, Manawatu-Wanganui area. They have a growth strategy called Accelerate 25. All of the mayors have joined up to it. We put a senior government official in to work with their lead team. We get consultants in to look at what are their potential capabilities and opportunities. And ministers meet every couple of weeks and scrutinise the senior officials to see the outcomes of each plan. We have some that we don't have full intervention in, but it's more of a light touch. And that's the likes of the Canterbury Economic Development Strategy, where I was down there about 6 or 8 weeks ago launching that one. So we have less of an involvement in that, but we still partner with those local leaders on some of the initiatives that they are keen to work constructively with central government on. So after the 23rd of September, if I'm lucky enough to still be your local MP, and I'll be working hard to ensure that I am, and in government, I'd be very happy to advocate and sit down with the Chamber of Commerce and with the support of KCDC's leadership to ensure that we can help you with your growth aspirations.
Thank you. Now, can we get a question or two from the audience? Who's got the microphone for that? Somebody got a microphone? Right down the back there. If you'd like to bring the microphone up so people can talk. Oh, it's a gentleman down the back. You got a question there, sir?
I have a question. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. My question is directed to Minister Guy. Minister Guy, will you, when the House introduces a bill on dignified dying, support it in the first reading and the second reading and the third reading?
Nathan.
That's Conrad, isn't it? Hi, Mr. Peterson. Welcome. Good question. This is about David Seymour's bill, which Chris and I thought for a moment that it might have been up for a first reading prior to the House dissolving in the last couple of weeks. And the reality is that there wasn't enough time for it to have a first reading. What I have said, Conrad, is I'm happy to support it for a first reading, but here's the proviso. I'm making no further commitment after that point. So for those of you that don't perhaps understand how it works with a bill, is it needs to have enough support of the Parliament to get a first reading, to send it to a select committee. And then they call for submissions from the public. And I imagine on this one, there will be thousands and thousands and thousands of submissions. The select committee will probably go on the road and hear a lot of those submissions. And I'm very keen, Conrad, to hear the debate because it needs to be factual. There's a lot of emotion around this particular topic. I'm very keen to hear from the clinicians, the professional people, as to what they think. So in summary, I'll support it if I'm back in Parliament to a first reading, send it off to the select committee, hear the debate, keeping in touch with what the local community thinks, and then making a decision whether to support it thereafter.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Just before you get up to there, Chris, there was something that was talked about on the river cruises I was on. Some countries already have that, others don't, but they're thinking about it. It's going to be a very topical question and a very difficult one to be decided upon. Chris, what would you like to say about it?
Yeah, hoping that I do have the privilege of coming back after the election too. I think it's my obligation to be upfront about where I stand on this issue too. So my position is very similar to Nathan's, that I will support David Seymour's bill at the first reading to go to select committee. I hold some concerns about David's bill that I didn't hold for the bill that was under the name of the Honourable Marion Street, because I think David's bill goes much further beyond, because Marion's bill was to deal with people who were going to die already. So David's bill goes further than that, and I do have serious concerns about whether I will support it beyond that. If you ask me in principle, whether I support the euthanasia under the guises of what it stood as under Marion Street's bill, yes, but not at the moment where David Seymour's bill is. I think it holds some serious concerns to me as David Seymour's bill stands.
Thanks. Another question from the audience who's got to bring the microphone. Oh, a gentleman there with the microphone.
Bruce Taylor from Waikanai. I'd like the candidates from my electorate, Otaki, to answer this. The housing expert Professor Philippa Howden-Chapman stated at the end of 2016 that 5% of houses in New Zealand can be defined as affordable. Otago University research shows that there are now 3,400 people defined as homeless in the Greater Wellington region. How did this happen in Aotearoa, New Zealand? And what are you going to do to make housing affordable again and end homelessness?
Thank you very much. Wish to say something, Rob, on that one?
Yes, I think I do. It's really important to me that we make sure that we have houses over the head of every New Zealander. How did we get into this mess? Well, it is complicated and it didn't occur over 5 minutes, but it's been very obvious that it's been coming. And all the media has been able to talk about this over and over again. It is only National that refused to use the word crisis. So what have we got? We have a situation where demand is much higher than the supply. Now, we know as a government in waiting that we need to intervene when the market does not work. That is one of the things that Labour understands. National will stand back and go, well, the market will work fine. But the reality is we aren't building enough houses, and all the stats show that. We're also not building enough houses that are warm and dry and smaller. Those houses that we need for people on low incomes, fixed incomes, and rent to buy. We also need to do something about the rampant immigration that we've got. At the moment, I think it's over 73,000 this year. And while New Zealand is a great country because we always have people coming into it, we need to take, as Nathan would have said about the expressway, a cup of tea. We need to slow it down a little bit because our resources in New Zealand, our infrastructure, can't cope. And one of the main areas of that infrastructure is housing. Now, the national government was the government that was going to get rid of red tape, but they haven't managed to speed up the building of housing. What you find with social houses is they've been knocked down in many cases. Have you lost some in your electorate? Were they replaced? No. So that's excellent work if you're trying to get rid of social houses. But we need to build more. We need to encourage councils to build more. And kudos for the councillors in this electorate who decided to hold on to their social housing. Well done. We need to encourage everyone to get on board and start building social houses. Just as we did in the 1930s. Even our former Prime Minister, John Key, grew up in a state house. So let's just get with the program. Let's just get on with it and start building houses.
Rob, while you're there, can I ask you, what is an affordable price for a house to purchase that Labour keep telling us about?
Affordable is something that it depends upon your income. The reality is that the affordable houses that National have been talking about in Auckland are just ridiculous sums of money. Now, Chris, do you actually have the affordable? Chris is going to help me out with the actual number, but I can tell you it is, less than 350 was affordable around this area.
350?
The reality is that I'll answer it a different way. How are we going to make affordable houses? We're going to do factory builds. We're going to also upskill and upscale our builders, because in New Zealand we have a lot of builders and a lot of companies, but they're small. We need to increase the size of them by giving them certainty that there is going to be work out there. And we need to help with their workforce by making sure that they have apprenticeships, which is something we haven't talked about tonight. When National came in 2006, they gutted the apprenticeship scheme, and we have far less apprenticeships now than we had in 2008. If we don't bring that on board, we actually can't build the houses either.
No, well, this is the problem. You're saying that we need the apprenticeship scheme, and everybody agrees with that, but that's not going to help build 100,000 homes in 10 years, is it? Because an apprenticeship takes 5 years, and you can't put an apprenticeship onto building a house.
Look, everything's going to help, and there isn't just one answer. So we're going to create an affordable housing authority, and they'll have one job to make sure that we get houses built. This is part and parcel of the cornerstone of Labour Party policy, to make sure that we build affordable houses.
Would National like to comment on that at all?
Well, thanks, Nigel. The average house price in Kapiti is about $460,000, and Horowhenua it's about $220,000, $230,000. I was speaking to a guy who lives in Foxton today. He purchased a house for $160,000, and he is working in Palmerston North at the Allflex factory up there. And he said, I love living in Foxton, it's absolutely fantastic. And I said, how do you get on with commuting? He said, we bring a whole carload of Foxtonians up to Palmerston North each day who work up there. He said, great affordable housing in Foxton. And he said, I'm chewing through my mortgage. And so we've got, I guess, a bit of an issue in terms of social housing around the country. Bruce, you know as well as I do, there's always been people that have been living it rough in New Zealand. And thanks for nodding. And it doesn't make it right, exactly right. That doesn't make it right. But it's not, this isn't a new thing. It's something that every government has been grappling with. The national government invests $2.5 billion a year in housing support. A lot of that is in social housing support. So in my office here in Paraparaumu and in Levin, where I get to see thousands of constituents a year, my office staff work very closely with Housing New Zealand and social housing providers to get them into a decent home. Yes, we need to do more. And what was really disappointing for me in government is that Labor and the Greens wouldn't support RMA reform. The Resource Management Act has a lot to answer for. So we have streamlined the Resource Management Act to open up supply to get more houses built. But across the other side of the house, they couldn't bring themselves to support the amendments to the RMA to free up supply. I'll leave you with that thought.
Thank you. Chris, I'll ask Chris, you might like to comment, because up in the Auckland area, I know it's not here, but they wouldn't release land. You guys wouldn't agree with releasing land up in the Three Kings area. I know it's not here, but this is the sort of problems we're having. Can't we get a unity between the two, National and Labor and Greens, and perhaps David, who told somebody to F off today at a business meeting?
Don't worry, I won't be doing
something
that.
like this?
Well, it's always the detail there, but if you're talking about land in Auckland, some of the land that Nick Smith proposed for some of these areas were power stations, graveyards and schools. So the land simply wasn't appropriate. The government is always blaming the Auckland Council for the Auckland housing crisis. I think people in this room are probably more concerned about the housing crisis here in our region.
Have we got one here, though?
Well, I think if you look at, there's one story I tell on a regular basis, which I think is a sad story, which is of some land in Porirua on the Castor Loop, Castor Crescent, where there used to be about 20 Housing New Zealand homes, which were all demolished in early 2011. Housing New Zealand said that they were going to replace those homes. They sent letters to all the residents in the area, and that land now still sits vacant. The demand for Housing New Zealand homes in my area is still very high. There are still a lot of boarded up homes in vacant areas, and as Rob says, if a basic right in New Zealand is to have a decent home, then we should start building homes to live in, and affordable homes. I'm a state house boy too, and I'm in politics to make sure that every family that needs a home can live in a home and afford it. And this government has, not rebuilt homes that should have been built, and the flow-on effect of that is people either living in cars or living in crowded houses, which causes other things and end up costing the taxpayer more money.
Thanks, Chris. Mind you, Chris, Prime Ministers come out of state houses, so watch out, you could be a Prime Minister. Now let's get on to the hospital issue. Oh, sorry.
I just had a housing question.
Oh, right, sure.
Sort of twofold. One is promising to build 100,000 homes in 10 years. Realistically, with consenting and everything else and that needs to go in with it, how are you going to do that? Second question, the Affordable Housing Commission, agency you'll set up, feels to me much like another piece of bureaucracy. That's another kink in the wheel in getting the houses built. So, and I guess that's a realistic question because you're promising big things. How are you going to do that?
Okay, so the second part is the answer to the first part of your question. If you want us to build 100,000 homes and you think it's impossible, then you're going to need a rather big behemoth who's going to take charge of the situation. And that's what the Housing Authority is going to be. It's going to have the ability to, with the Public Works Act, to just like if we need land as with motorways, to make sure that we get land to build the homes. We're not going to, on average, build 10,000 a year. That's just going to be impossible. So we're going to make sure that we ramp up, and over that 10 years we will, because we're going to be ambitious about it. There's no other solution to the problems in Auckland and the problems in Wellington unless someone starts building more homes. The market isn't delivering those homes. It just isn't. So how do we make sure that those Kiwis who want to get their foot into home ownership get there? Well, it's time for a government to step in. These are homes to buy. We're not going to give these homes away, so people will be paying for them. So the net effect is going to be zero on the balance books. And I think if we want to make sure that these homes are built, and someone raised this issue before about workforce, we've got a workforce issue too. So that's why, as part of our immigration package and policy that we released about a month ago or 2 months ago, there is going to be a special visa for people with those skills to come into New Zealand for the first tranche of the building. We're going to need some time to get Kiwis trained up to build these houses, and in that time we're going to need to get some overseas work to make sure that they can start getting built, because we want to start on day one to make sure these houses are built. So we need a body to make sure that 100,000 homes get built. If you think it's a bureaucracy, it may be, but you're going to need you're going to need an authority like that to make sure they get built.
Ewan, you'd like to comment on that?
Yeah, I guess I should be front up and say my small company that I have is a real estate company. But I have been a long time advocate in Porirua of the standard of housing, particularly in the east. And I am disgusted at what we make people live in. But this is the houses that are there were built 60 and 70 years ago. So they just haven't just deteriorated in the last 9 years. Most of those houses, to be honest, need to be bulldozed. They are impossible. So we talk about 100,000 new houses. We have to replace the existing stock. And I can tell you, Housing New Zealand would probably be one of the worst landlords in the country. They just do not and have never maintained those houses, and they have got to a state where they are in a bad state. Now, our government has just announced that we are going to try and do as much as we can by providing curtains and all sorts of things to try and fix some of these houses. But these houses are past fixing, and the ones that were bulldozed in Porirua East were ghettos. And they should never have been built like that in the first place. So, this housing, and we also have to teach people how to live in these houses. Now, I go to some of these houses, and the windows are it's right across the board. They don't air them out. They don't open the windows. They don't do anything, and then they expect the government to fix them. Now, it's an issue, and it's a big issue. And Housing New Zealand probably are the worst people to be landlords. And Masterton is an organisation over there that took over all of the state houses, and they are social housing providers. And you couldn't get a better model for that. And I'm hoping very shortly the same thing will happen in Titahi Bay in Porirua, that some other organisation will come in and take them over and get them to a state and maintain them.
Rob, you've got something to say?
Yeah, let's blame the people who live in the crappy houses and then talk about giving them some curtains. Well, I'll just give you one example of how it's really hard to live in a house when there are too many people and not enough houses.
Some of those people choose to live in large numbers in the same house.
Yeah,
not everybody.
The houses that I've been into, when there are 14 people and people sleeping on the floor, they're not choosing to live in that house because they want the extra warmth and the wetness that occurs when 14 people live in a house. They live in that house because they have no other choice. And it is hard to stay warm and dry. Well, I've been in those houses.
And so have I.
And
I've spent 15 years in them.
And you're blaming the people who live in them.
I'm not blaming them. I'm blaming the condition of the houses as well.
Well, I want to blame one set of people for the last 9 years for looking the other way, and that's the government. Let's do something about it, not make excuses.
We are doing something about it. We have insulated all of them too, by the way.
Which leads on, if we've got this problem of people living in multiple numbers, as we know they are, in houses and causing health problems, we'll get onto a health issue, because I know there's some people here tonight want to know more about your thoughts on developing health facilities here on the Kapiti Coast. Now, with our successful expressway, we have got a large number of people coming and a lot more to come, but we're not going to travel to Wellington every time we get a sore foot. So, Nathan, perhaps you might like to comment on that. I'm not saying that it's a hospital, I'm saying health services, but the petition, I believe, tonight is up to 17,000 wanting some sort of facilities.
Hi, Jill. I read your article in the paper. Hi, Conrad, Kevin, Mayor Guru, if he was here, I'd acknowledge him too. I've talked to pretty much the people that are behind the petition, and I think the aspirations of it are very good. So I look at this issue as, and when Conrad came to see me several months ago about it, before the petition was launched, I said to him, in my view, we should look at it as short, medium, and maybe in the longer term. And so, short term, what do we need to do? My view is, get more services here. And how do we do that? Is that GP-led services? What do we need to do? More specialists here, overnight beds, better ambulance services. Then in the medium term, so what I have said publicly, and I'll tell you all this evening, it's what I say publicly and privately, so you know, is that ultimately we need the DHB to come in and do a full needs analysis for our local community. What is our community going to look like in the future? Our demographics. So 26% of Kapiti residents are over 65 at the moment. We have one of the higher proportions of elderly, actually first or second out of any electorate in the country. And so the first thing, we need the DHB to come in and do a full needs assessment. What is it that we should have in our community that we currently haven't got? And then work with the local GPs to provide some better services. We need to link in with what's happening in Kenny Peru. Fortunately, we fought off the DHB some years ago when they wanted to sell the vacant land. That would have been an absolute disaster. Hori Tapai at the moment are considering moving out of the health centre, and building on the land that is available. They have got some great plans. They came and saw me last week. That will create more space in the Kapiti Health Centre for more facilities. So first thing, get the DHB in to do a full needs analysis. Follow up on that with more services. As the population grows, ultimately we will need more and more services. The government of the day could come in and say, yep, we're going to build a hospital. The reality is there's a worldwide shortage of doctors, of nurses, and we're training more and we're bonding them and we're doing all of those things. The reality is you could build a bricks and mortar facility and not have the skilled people to come in and actually make it work and hum. So rather than jumping there straight away, let's consider that investment for more services in the short to medium term, and then look at what we need to do in the longer term strategically.
So how effective is this petition that got about 17,000 going to affect this decision?
Well, the petition says for an incoming government to consider it. Is that the more or less words? So the incoming government, I'm sure, will consider a petition of this size. In my view, it was always going to get 20,000 signatures, because it is a big issue here. It's a matter of what is the size and shape of it, how's it going to work, all of those things need to be factored in. So the petition has generated a discussion, and I think that's fantastic. If I'm the local MP, I will continue to advocate for more health services out here in the short term, while we look at a medium to long term strategic investment for our community. We are going to need it, and down the road, of course, we've got Kenny Peru with capacity to do some things as well. So all of those considerations need to be in the mix.
Thank you. Right, well, I was going to say Chris, but anyhow, I just...
Okay, so let's just look at that. And I do agree with a lot of what Nathan has said. The petition is fantastic. It has raised this issue right to the top of the consciousness of the electorate and hopefully MPs as well. And it's at the top of my mind. But when we talk about what a future government might do, let's look at the health budget. Infometrics, who we commissioned, an independent firm, looked at what was being spent on the health budget, and they found that the national government had underspent by $2.3 billion. That's why our health boards are broke. That's why you hear health board CEOs quitting, because they can't cut any more from their business.
They were broke under Labor.
You're talking about
the DHB deficit was 70 million under Labor.
Yep. Look, let Nathan talk if he wants to, because he's not actually answering the question here. When he says we could build a building, we only need to look at Dunedin, and no, they can't build a building. They haven't even found a place to put it. They haven't found the funding, and they announced it last election, and there's a leaky building there. We need better services here, but under which government are you going to get better health services? I can tell you that health is a priority for our government, because we are not going to move forward with the tax cuts for the top 10% of New Zealand. We're going to put that money into housing, health, and education. No, mate, you were offering potentially second round of tax cuts. This is the first lot at the budget.
No, today was announced there will be no tax cuts until at least 2020.
Oh, other than the ones that you've already announced. I know you're a new candidate and only a deputy mayor, but you did announce them in the budget.
No, I'm not a deputy mayor anymore.
Former deputy mayor. Under which government are we going to see health budgets restored? It is going to be under a Labor government. Are we going to be able to put enough doctors and nurses in them? We have a real tsunami problem occurring with nurses. We've got an ageing workforce, and yet we are not training our nurses in New Zealand. They're coming out of training, they're not going into the hospitals where they need to be employed so they can get the skills that they need to stay in the workforce here. They're heading overseas. Why is that occurring? Because the DHBs are broke and can't afford them. We need to increase the number of doctors that are bonded in our communities, because when I talk to people in the northern part of the electorate, the thing that really annoys them most is the fact they see a different locum every time. It's impersonal. That person doesn't know their issues. It's not good health.
Thank you very much. Now, another question from the audience. Yep, there's the hands going up. Trish. Yeah, it's most probably on, Trish.
Thank you for hearing me. It's not health related, but I would like to know all your policies on your government lead. What are you doing for the disabled people like myself who are struggling to live? Because last time I asked this question, nothing has changed. I am struggling to get a job. I'm at rent over my head. I am struggling to live day by day, and I'm sick of people not giving me what I need as work. And I'm fed up with all your promises and what you're going to do.
Thanks, Trish.
Yeah, I got myself.
Chris, it sounds though you might be into the firing line here.
I'm quite happy to. Trish, can I thank you for your question? I first met Trish 3 years ago at the IHC debate, and where you asked many questions there too, Trish. I'm happy to answer again. Look, I think there's something going on with services and organisations in our community where support for people like you, Trish, or our elderly.
Yes, just a moment, Trish, let him answer.
where it's getting harder to support people like Trish in the community, whether it be disabilities, whether it be the elderly or mental health. And I think when I was talking to Trish before the debate started, she was saying how difficult it is for her to make ends meet. And I don't know your particular circumstances, Trish, but I think Trish is unfortunately again one of those victims of high rents, limited, limited income, and also Trish, I think you've got your own special needs that you need to be looked after as well. Whether it be, and I'm not going to name some of the organisations in the room, but I have met many organisations in the room who are finding it very difficult to retain their budgets to look after a whole host of people in a community that have particular needs, which I find reprehensible, given the nature of this community. I think it's already been said about the proportion of superannuitants in our community. I'm nearly there, Trish. But also people with mental health issues and people with special needs. We've seen some funding go from the likes of IHC, quite a large proportion of funding. We've seen other organisations in our community have their ability to support people in our community go as well. This is not a new thing. Unfortunately, it's been happening over the last 6 or 7 years, and it's people in our community who have higher needs are those who suffer. And I'm glad Trish is here, because it's sometimes those people who don't get to have a voice. I think the next Labor government will make sure that, especially the thing that I find difficult with the Kapiti community around mental health, will be properly funded. And then Trish, I think I've just found out you live across the road, so I'm your local MP. I might have to have a sit down with you too.
Thank you very much indeed. Another question from the audience. Anybody else want to put a question? There's a lady back there. We're just about running out of time, so we wish to... here we are. Yes.
Thank you, Nigel. I'm Kathy and I chair the local health advocacy group.
Just talking to that microphone a bit, thanks.
Hi, I'm Kathy and I'm chairing a health advocacy group set up by Mayor Guru Nathan at the moment. And just following up on your points, Nathan, we do have good relationships have built up over the last... We've only been going 2 or 3 months and we've built up good relationships with the DHBs. And the Parapara Umu Raumati Community Board has written to the Ministry of Health requesting a report and plan be set up on health and disability needs on the Kapiti Coast. But I'd just like to point out that mental health is actually the top high priority in Kapiti at the moment, along with social isolation for elderly people. We have issues around maternity and ambulance services. So while we wait for our community hospital to be built, and the mental health is urgent, we need a mental health crisis service up in Kapiti right now. So I'm just wondering that how are you going to help us to implement that? We also need after hours GP services. I understand that paramedics do not work 24/7. They don't work after hours from the ambulances. So we're having the Mayor is going to be having a discussion with the ambulance services and the CCDHB around implementing
We'll get Nathan to answer that, shall we, Kathy?
Yeah, so I just want to know how and when, because these are urgent issues that need to be sorted out now.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Kathy. I applaud the advocacy group that you've got set up with a direct line into the Mayor, and I know that your relationship is pretty strong with the DHB. You might be aware that the government just recently in the last week or two announced $100 million into mental health initiatives. There's 17 new initiatives. One is upskilling and attracting the staff, also early intervention. We need to start a lot of these initiatives right back at primary school level. Trish, I acknowledge, well, Trish is gone, I was just going to acknowledge Trish. I'm happy to work with Chris because I see Trish around a fair bit just to ensure that she is getting everything possible for her personally. So if you could let us get the campaigning out of the way, Kathy, and see how the election shapes up. I'm very happy to work constructively with you if I'm re-elected after the 23rd, because a lot of what you're talking about folds into the health petition, because it's really about more services for a growing community here on the Kapiti coast.
Right,
so
thank
thanks for raising it.
Yep. Just before I ask this, Chris, did you want to say something quickly?
Oh, just, Kathy, around mental health services, I think this is another symptom of when you aren't investing enough in health. And just so people know, there are a number of organisations in the community, Te Arakotawai, which I know you know about, which has had its funding cut. But the one that I'm most concerned about is one that's actually a really strong service, and that's Kapiti Youth Services. But it's only strong because of the strength of the management team there to scramble enough money to cobble together. Yeah.
Well, they just got some funding the other day.
So, yeah, well, I'll come back to that point in a minute. But what we need is sustainable funding for those organisations. That's the problem. And the government did announce 17 initiatives, but my understanding is that a lot of those initiatives were pilots, which we don't necessarily know how long they're going to go for. So I think instead of messing around with this much longer, a government needs to commit to some sustainable funding for mental health. Otherwise, it's going to be piecemeal, and one day it's there, one day it's gone.
Thank you very much. Just before I ask this gentleman to put his question, just a yes or no, and I don't know whether this has got to do. I think it has. It's related
Will
to
there
the
be a
question we've
frost
just
tonight?
been asking about. Do you, just a yes or no, right along the line, do you agree with legalising marijuana?
No.
Thank you very much. I don't see a mad rush out the door at the moment, do I? No, right. Just gentleman in the front here, sir.
Just sort of unfortunately going to go back to mental health. Is there any part of the strategies I hear that all of you are going to do something with regards to providing more services for the people who need it? Is there any consideration in actually how do you teach your employers to remove the stigma from it for when people wish to employ for jobs?
Thank you very much.
That's an interesting. The last part of your question is interesting. In terms of some of the policies that we've introduced, the one that I'm most excited about, and I think it's because of what I see in the schools when I go and visit. Growing up now is different to when we were growing up. I think social media and the devices that are in all our pockets put a different kind of pressure on teenagers. And when I speak to them about bullying and their mental health, I can see a light go off. Sometimes it's a positive light and sometimes it's a negative light. So at our party conference earlier this year, she wasn't our leader at the time, but Jacinda Ardern announced that we'll be putting a registered nurse in every school, tasked primarily to be able to deal with kids so we can cut off mental health problems very, 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 very early. I think that will stop a generation of troubles, but I'll go back to the higher point here around health funding. We're going to put back the $2.3 billion that we think should have been spent in healthcare over time, and mental health is going to be one of the areas that we're going to prioritise. And I think it's the sleeper issue at the moment that has crept up on the government. But if we don't start doing something about it soon, we're going to see the cost of dealing with it skyrocket.
Thank you very much. Nathan,
Well,
just a quick
I
comment?
just want to tell you about the health investment that's being made, because there's been quite a bit of rhetoric coming out on the stage here on my right. So health spending is $16.8 billion, which is an all-time high, and it's up $5 billion since National came into office. So we are investing in health, and the challenge will be always, well, you need to do more. Well, we don't want to create more and more pen pushers. We want to ensure that the investment that the government is making, that it's getting to the front line. In terms of your specific question, I've been thinking about a reasonable answer, and I can't think of one, honestly, about the stigma of an employee and how that plays out in the workplace and the responsibility on the employer. That's pretty much, I think, what your question is. And I would like to think that every employer is doing the right thing for those that may have mental health issues. And we want to ensure that mental health services are accessible to everyone. The specifics of your question, I need to have a chat to you over a cup of tea and talk about your own personal circumstance to understand a bit more about it.
Thank you very much. Rob, you got a quick one?
Yeah, I don't think this is a subject where any of us want to politicise mental health. I think we all want to make sure that people are healthy and live fulfilling lives. I went to see Mike King talk, and I'm sure many of you have heard of him, but I just want to share one little thing that I took away from that really fabulous meeting at a Kapiti school, is that we all suffer from depression from various times. And when he asked that room, and it was full of parents, a cross-section of our community, and they said how many people had thought about suicide, just thought about it. Nearly everyone in the room put their hand up. But the problem is, our community and our world seems to think that just having a dark thought makes you unwell, that we should stigmatise you, that you're not okay. That's where we need to move away from. We all have thoughts like that from time to time. The thing is, most of us don't act on them. And the more that we can open up those communications, and thank you, Nathan, for saying you're going to have that discussion afterwards, that is what we need to do. There was a case in America where someone wrote into their boss and said, I'm going to have a mental health day. And the boss, that email has since been released, said, absolutely, this is very normal, go home and get yourself right, etc. That's what we need to do as a community. We do not need to start saying that you are unwell and we're going to ostracise you. So not a political comment, just a comment from the heart.
Thank you very much. Now, we've just got two more quick questions from the audience and we'll wrap this evening up. But as I say, you will be able to meet up with these gentlemen outside and a cup of tea and have a chat with them. Sir.
Yeah. Kevin Burrows. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the debate about health. If the petition's done one thing, it's raised that debate about health around here. On the issue, Nathan, of the DHB doing a needs assessment, I would agree with you to a certain extent, but the community has to be deeply involved in that needs assessment. We don't want a couple of people from the bureaucracy coming along and doing a needs assessment. It needs to come from the community. My question is not about health. That's going to surprise you, I suppose. And it's about retirement villages. The Retirement Villages Rates Amendment Bill was sponsored by Ruth Dyson, went through the select committee just for people, what that bill does. I live in a house in the street, I meet certain criteria, I'm entitled to a rebate on my rates. Person who lives in a retirement village, same street up the road, is not entitled to that. The amendment bill was to fix that anomaly. As Grey Power, we made submissions supporting that bill. I'm not quite too sure where it's at. I know it's come out the select committee. I'm not quite too sure where it's at. But my question is, where do the respective parties stand on that bill? Are they going to support it or oppose it?
I'll go first, because it's our bill, so if we didn't support it, I'd be in a little bit of trouble. Just to let you know where it is, Kevin, I think it came back from select committee, and it had enough support around the House by one vote, I think, to continue. But it's sitting on the order paper at the moment, so it's in limbo. So all things going well on September the 23rd, we can continue it as a government bill.
Thank you. And one last question. Or, did you want to say something, Nathan, on that?
I'm happy to.
Yep.
Because we supported the intent of the bill, but we've got some concerns on the back of the select committee. And I'll just run through those, Kevin, for you. It doesn't consider freehold, leasehold, cross-lease, licence to occupy, the various tenancy agreements. So there's some confusion from our side of the select committee about that. Also, what about the different rates? How does it apply to land and water? So there's privacy issues. So there's quite a few issues amongst that bill, and we just feel that That should have been clarified and rectified in the select committee to gain our support. Well, I think you'll find that those ideas haven't been picked up.
Right. And the lady, yes.
Oh, before the night's over, could we have a comment on climate change and sustainable energies? And how grateful are you to the Greens parties for to making us all aware of these issues? And how sad are you to lose Mr. Dunn? And
that's the third question. There's going to be a frost tonight.
And as member of the primary industries, how are our farmers going? And are they doing what they should be doing and behaving themselves? And our rivers and our water.
Yeah, 5 and a half, 6 questions.
You can answer one.
Well,
how's the farmers going at the moment?
Just answer the last one, I guess.
Right.
Are you wade or swim? I swam in the Manawatu River this summer.
That's not an answer. As a government minister, are you in support of improving our water in this country?
Too right. Too right I am. Did you see the primary sector come out yesterday? 80% of the primary sector said they want the rivers swimmable for their children and grandchildren. This is a debate that we all need to have. We're all in this together because it's not just agriculture, it's urbanisation, it's industrial growth, it's point source discharge. So yeah, we've signed up to the Paris to the climate change. That's going to cost New Zealand billions to get there. We need to provide a solution for half of our emissions come from animals, biological emissions. We're investing heavily in the Greenhouse Gas Consortium at Massey University. We are leading the charge with the Global Research Alliance. 47 countries have signed up with New Zealand and we're all sharing the science. And the breakthrough for animals is likely to be a vaccine, a bolus, potentially pasture genetics, potentially animal genetics as well. So 85% of our New Zealand energy is renewable. Our transport fleet is getting better. And some of you will think, well, agriculture should be brought into the ETS, and that's what the Greens think, and that's what Labor are out there proposing. And the reality is a big part of agriculture is already in the ETS because they're big consumers of electricity, big consumers of fuel, so they pay a fair amount. Our concern is throwing the biological emissions into the ETS overnight after the 23rd of election, our 23rd of September election. It will make us less competitive in the world as a producer of food. We feed 40 million people. Our exports from the primary sector are worth 41 billion. That's 9,000 for every man, woman and child. So yes, there are challenges with our emissions profile. The way to get through that is with decent science. Yes, we need to plant more trees. So they are some of the solutions that this government will be focusing on, not knee-jerk policy initiatives that are actually going to stifle and slow down the New Zealand economy.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we could be here for a good part of the night. It's been a very interesting night. I hope you've found it the same way. And there's loads and loads of topics. I was going to ask when the Waikanai to Otaki rail line was going to be fixed and electrified, but we run out of time, but that might happen. But I'm going to close tonight, but as I say, these gentlemen will be out there and you might be able to ask those questions. But in my conclusion this evening, and can I just finish off with a Gareth Morgan quote? This was given on Maori Live Debate last night. He was asked if a vote for Top was a wasted vote. He said, no. A wasted vote is when you don't vote for your principle. If you vote for what you believe in, democracy works, otherwise it fails. And I thought that was an excellent quote. With that, I'll ask our Deputy Chair of the Kapiti Coast Chamber to come forward, and that's Julian Hope, to thank our candidates tonight.
I guess the one thing you can be grateful for on an evening like this is that you're sitting down there asking the questions rather than sitting up here under the pressure having to answer them. I know I don't envy them that place. Before I thank you for coming along, I just would like to speak to your question about mental health and employers. If, as a chamber, we can help in any way through our learning and development training to help employers understand a little bit more about what they can be doing to encourage employees with mental health issues, then I'd really welcome that conversation with you. So would very much like to thank these candidates for coming here. It's an amazing part of democracy that we can come into the room and actually speak directly to the people who are going to represent us and have them answer questions in such an open and honest way. So thank you very much, gentlemen. It's really very good to have you here. So I now get to present the best part of the evening, and at least they can have a little tipple at some point. Probably after the cup of tea. So, Ewan Morrell, National Party. Chris Farfoy. And Rob. I've got one more for our, was it Chief Controller? Nigel Wilson, thank you. Some special thanks to other people who helped put these events on for us too. The Coast Community Church, we thank you for the venue, to Beach FM for their support, NZME Radio, to each one of you for coming out on a chilly evening and taking an active part in the democratic process. I'd like just the microphone if Jill Stansfield would like a quick word on the hospital petition.
Thank you. Yes, it's too big an opportunity not to make the most of this. Thank you if you are one of the 17,000 who have already signed, and that actually represents about a third of our population. Do you realise that? That's pretty darn good, so congratulations. I do have the petition here now, needless to say. Couldn't let a good opportunity go, so if you haven't signed, please make the most of it, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Jill. We do have tea and coffee and quite a display of biscuits, thanks to some of the gentlemen on the committee who learned how to display biscuits. Please go out into the foyer and enjoy those and have a speak with the candidates.
Your MP, mate. You're HQ. Yep, yours too.